Good morning. I'm Perry Beeman, Senior Staff Writer at the Des Moines Business Record, and we're here this morning as part of our series of video panel discussions on a variety of topics that we thought would be interesting for our readers and viewers. Today we're talking about outdoor recreation and its role in workforce development and retention and quality of life issues here in Greater Des Moines. And I'm going to spend just a minute here introducing you to our panel, and then we're going to spend about an hour speaking just among ourselves about these issues, and we're glad you could join us. So, on the far side here, we have Hannah Inman, who has been involved in the Capital Crossroads planning effort here in Greater Des Moines, and also the Great Outdoors Foundation.
Yep.
And we also have Teva Dawson, who's with the Des Moines MPO. We have Kathy Kling, who's an economist at Iowa State University in Ames. And we have Rich Leopold, who's the director of Polk County Conservation. So we want to talk a little bit about this and draw on your expertise. Teva, maybe you can set the stage, because the MPO has really been heavily involved in the Water Trails Report and other things.
Right, we just completed a plan for the 150 miles of rivers and creeks in the Greater Des Moines area. And what was remarkable in doing kind of this recreational plan of how to engage people more in terms of connecting with the rivers in a different way, not in a way that's about flooding or water quality, but really about a way of finding joy and experiencing the beauty of those places. It was interesting to be part of the planning process, to go and meet with so many different city councils and have them not just look at you and roll their eyes at another plan that they were frustrated to have to figure out how to fund. There's tremendous support, not only from elected officials, but really from the business community. Frick Tollickson, who's been kind of leading our effort, was here. He has would say over and over that he's really feels like this is one of the key economic development plans that really has to move forward in order to continue to innovate in our community to attract quality workforce, that competition is tight and that this community needs to continue to grow, and that our rivers are really a missed opportunity for providing some of those amenities that continue to make us an attractive place to live and work.
In your work, do you see that being particularly attractive for any certain age bracket or demographic?
Well, certainly when we're thinking about changes to the downtown area, that might include things like whitewater or even just loops of a lazy river kind of doing a circuit. We know that that'll be important for tourism, as well as maybe sort of the young professionals who are learning to, or working and living downtown. But what came up in our surveys was there's strong interest in fishing, and we know that there's an aging population in our community, and they want to go out and fish, but they want to be able to do it safely. And there really isn't places to go and be safe on the edge of streams or rivers. And so we do think this plan will help to engage a wide variety of people in ways that we haven't seen before. Even simple things like putting stair steps, like Rich has done in some other parks, really just simple limestone steps down on the edge of a creek into allows young children to safely play in these waterways, and we just haven't provided any sort of recreational amenities like that. So I think we'll see it anywhere from millennials to young families to seniors.
And Hannah, is that what you were hearing at Capital Crossroads too? Is that
Certainly. I mean, I think like Teva said, that the water recreation and trails is our most underutilized outdoor recreation. And so when you layer that upon our existing infrastructure that I think we're kind of known for as like locally, our trail system, it makes things really dynamic. And creating shorter, right now you have long stretches that you can kayak and canoe, but with Waterworks putting in an ADA accessible boat ramp, that will help shorten some of them. So smaller children can take that float trip with their parents and really create day trip opportunities. I think that's something that we're really going to see increased tourism and local access to some of our outdoor recreation.
And Rich, so you've been involved lately in a lot of improvements in the Polk County system, and tell us a little bit about how that got financed and what you're up to.
Yep, so in 2012, Polk County residents by 72% passed the bond, the Polk County Water and Land Legacy Bond. And it contained a number of items. Some of it had to go where parks infrastructure, water quality, land acquisition, buffers, trails, things like that. So specifically with water, Teva had mentioned at one of our parks, Thomas Mitchell, we took a section of Camp Creek and we built a series of limestone stairways going down into Camp Creek. We took the banks and made them gently sloping. We removed invasives. You're on one set of stairs and you can see to the next set of stairs to the next set of stairs. So it's very comfortable for parents or grandparents or whatever. Get your kids in the creek. Let them play around, go up and down, try to dam it up, catch a frog or whatever. And we've seen a lot of success on a more remote park. We want to do that throughout the Des Moines metro area. So we're working very closely with watershed management authorities and others to make that happen. Our still water we went at right away, so our ponds and our lakes. Easter Lake has been a major renovation. It's now drained. It's quite a spectacle actually. And the lake itself is going to be wonderful when restored, but the amenities around it. So we're building a 10K trail around the lake that's 12-foot concrete. It'll be wide enough for strollers and bikes to go both ways on this trail.
At the same time?
At the same time, yes. It's a nice wide trail. It's got 7 bridges. It's going to be like Gray's Lake, but even bigger, actually. So it's turning a local park into more of a regional park, and we're preparing for that in other ways, as far as trailheads and bathrooms and event centers and restored bridge and everything like that. We have a number of ponds that we've renovated. So when we do that, we also do things to protect water quality and fishing that was mentioned. We're making many, many more fishing opportunities. So jetties and boardwalks and access points, and then making sure the fishery itself is healthy, working hand in hand with the Iowa DNR. They've been great as far as fish habitat, restocking, and measures like that.
So the Easter Lake project is in an area of the city that's grown quite a bit, right?
It has, yes, and the development around it continues to grow very fast. It's unique among county conservation boards in that it is an urban park. So we work very closely with Des Moines Parks and Recreation on our conservation planning. Ours is more of a passive use, so things like paddling or fishing or hiking or exploring, things like that. Des Moines Park and Rec does more active use, so dog parks, tennis courts, basketball, things like that. But it's a good partnership.
You and I have talked about this before, but is it a challenge with Easter Lake? I mean, do you think that the general public knows it's there, much as Chautauqua maybe is a little bit of a hidden gem? Do people not actually realize what you're going to have at Easter Lake yet?
I don't think they do, and it's a mess right now. It's a drained lake. There's a lot of construction. It's kind of smelly.
Is it drying out a bit so like we get a dirt bike down there?
Well, I didn't
Talk
hear
to
that.
Recreation.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll leave that for another,
Yeah.
we'll find someplace else.
The trail right now, so we've got 2 phases of a third 3-phase project going, but the phases are not connected. So there's a major project, construction project over Evergreen Avenue with the city of Des Moines that's on the dam face itself. So there are sections of trail and picnic areas and things like that there now, but it is kind of subdued and ripped up. So in a year or two, when we have our grand opening, it's going to be a gem that this whole area will know about. Just like Gray's Lake, you think 10, 15 years ago, Gray's Lake was not nearly what it is today. That's what Easter Lake will be 5 years from now.
Well, you're talking about a rehab project and an improvement project there. And Kathy, you've done a lot of research on lakes and rivers and sort of the economic impact. I think it'd be really interesting to hear what you found as far as what economic effect can these improvement projects have.
Yeah, so it's so much fun to hear what's going on, boots on the ground, because what I'm hearing here is focusing exactly on the topics and issues that are the economically most relevant. So to start, that's really, really cool and really exciting. I live in Ames and not Des Moines, but I'm going to take advantage of all of these sorts of opportunities, so that's really great. So I've been doing research on this topic for about 15 or 20 years, and I've had some great funding from the Department of Natural Resources as well as US EPA. We've done surveys of the entire population, random population surveys of Iowans. So we're not focused on the Des Moines area, but what we find across the state is really quite consistent. We've both looked at lake usage around the state as well as rivers and streams. And what we find is that the people that most avidly use our lakes and use our rivers and streams are higher income than average. They have more children, larger household size. They're more educated, and they are willing to drive further to get better amenities, better water quality. We see that over and over again. In the studies we started in around 2002, we were getting 60% or so of Iowa households indicating that they visited one of about 130 lakes, at least one that year. So those lakes that we have across the state are very much used by Iowans. Similar for rivers and streams, although the number was a little lower. I'm off the top of my head, I want to say 45% of households took at least one trip. So that sort of provides a lot of baseline information about usage, about where people go. As I said, and I think it bears repeating, people travel further, all else equal, to go to lakes, rivers, and streams that have better water quality, that have more amenities, and these are really viewed as very valuable opportunities for Iowans. So directly linking that to economics, well, there's several angles of economics, and it's been so, as I said, cool, because we've heard various pieces of them here. One is that if you happen to be in a business in a location near a lake or a river, when those are improved and more people visit, you sell more of your product, and that's a good thing for the local economy. In fact, we have some numbers to suggest that there's a fair amount of jobs and income that supports. But in fact, that's not really the most valuable part of these lakes, rivers, and amenities. The most valuable part is exactly the kinds of ideas you've been talking about. This makes Iowa and Des Moines a place people want to live because they have access to a high quality of life, a high opportunity. It's workforce development. It's people not only growing up in Iowa, wanting to stay in Iowa. It's that bulk of things is really what is, I think, the most important thing, and that often it's easy to want to just talk about how many cans of soda pop or fishing bait get bought and sold near a lake, and not recognize that really this is about quality of life and value. And I'll say one more thing on that topic before ending. One of the large areas of research that we have done with this data, the lakes, recreation data, and rivers and streams, is to try to deduce from people's patterns of usage just how valuable these are to them. How much are they willing to drive further? How much more cost and use of their time are they willing to take to access better water quality? And we repeatedly find that people are willing to pay in their additional time and gas and real money to have access to better lakes, rivers, and streams. And that's a measure of the value to them. If we think about doing benefit cost analysis, these are really measures of the benefits. How much more would people be willing to pay if they had to have improved rivers and streams? And in our studies, we find that people are consistently willing to pay more. And in thinking about sort of a local government, that might mean, or state government, that it is in fact worth it to Iowa citizens to invest in these amenities.
Well, maybe it's worth dropping in here just for context, Rich, the Polk County Legacy Fund and the Iowa vote, if you could talk about those being examples where there was significant public support.
Well, and many times you see smaller government units as experimental pilot programs that larger government units may look at and emulate. So what we've done with our Polk County Water and Land Legacy and what Johnson County's done and now Lynn County just passed one, you see a lot of those multiplier effects. So we talk about them, but now we have true Iowa experience. For example, the leveraging ability. I've been talking about Easter Lake. Front to back with the trail, event center, lake restoration, everything else. It's about a $30 million project. Only about 5 is actually coming from the bond. So there's a lot of other partners that are investing in this. The success that you see afterwards too. So we're doing a lot of baseline measurements on use patterns and things like that. A lot of what Professor Kling's work has shown, so that we can show that those same things are happening here in Polk County. We have a lot of that anecdotally. We know what's happening. but we want to get some hard numbers to show the entire community how this is adding. The one thing that I would add to that too is the attraction of a viable workforce. So when you talk to executives within Facebook and Microsoft and some of the expansions we've seen in the insurance industry and everything else, it's attracting a vibrant workforce that's important to them, and having these amenities are not just extras, these are core to attracting and keeping good people here in Iowa.
Well, so basically what happened with the Polk County bond issue is that a majority of the people in Polk County voted to tax themselves.
72%.
72%. And Iowa was, what?
Iowa was 62%
And
when
can
it
you
went
explain, I should have explained what that is.
Sure.
Explain what Iowa is.
Iowa is Iowa Water and Land Legacy. So it's a constitutional amendment that was voted upon by the people of Iowa, 62% passage, that the next 3/8 of a cent sales tax goes into a formula, a pie, that goes largely for natural resources, water quality, those types of things. It remains unfunded. It was passed in 2010, and here we are 5-6 years later, 7 years later now, and it still hasn't received too much legislative attention. When that happens, we've seen the experience of the states to the north and south of us. So Missouri has sustainable funding measures, Minnesota has sustainable funding measures, and they have seen drastic economic and environmental improvements. Once you have that funding stream, and it's not just about the money, it's about the predictability of future monies. Almost everything we have in Iowa, you have to fight year after year for whatever crumbs fall off the table. This gives you predictability, so we're able to work with agriculture and city water supplies and ethanol plants and everything else, and talk about water and natural resources in a much bigger, more predictable fashion, which is what business and capital investments want. You can't ask a farmer to make these huge changes and then change the rules in 2 years, or the funding stream dries up next year. You have to have fair, transparent, predictable funding streams, and that's what Iowa will do.
One of the interesting things there is that, 3 of you are involved in planning improvements in the area, basically. In the case of the Polk County Legacy Bond, is that the right thing? So the voters approved that and they taxed themselves. But in Iowa's case, we don't have the machinery in Iowa that allows a referendum for people to vote statewide to tax themselves, much as California has propositions.
Minnesota did that too. So Minnesota, the citizens themselves can vote to tax. Here in Iowa, it's a bureaucratic structural thing within the state, in that the voters can't, by public referendum, determine taxes. It has to go through legislative branch and executive approval. So we approved the constitutional amendment, and most people thought they were actually voting to do the 3/8 of a cent. But now we actually need legislative action, and we continue to have polls over and over that show bipartisan support. Rural, urban doesn't matter. There's a lot of support out there, but to translate public will to legislative will seems like a huge task in the state.
We could do a whole panel on this one point, but I think it's important just to make this point. Is it possible, what would change that? Would it take a constitutional amendment then for Iowans to have the ability to vote on such a proposition?
On specific tax issues?
Well, like this, like raising the 1 cent,
Yeah, so that's a great question, and one that I don't know the answer to.
because right now, you're waiting for the legislature to raise the sales tax. Comes up 3/8, at least 3/8 of a percentage point, that goes into Iowa automatically, right? Because that part of it's on the books.
So it's either a legislative question of Iowa code or a constitutional issue.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which it is.
Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the fishing improvements and everything, and I guess there's maybe 2 things happening there. You're catering both to existing residents and workers, right? But you're also appealing to new people who might want to get into fishing and things. And I think DNR's data has been, fishing has tended to be strong, but maybe has fallen off, and then it came back up a little bit. Hunting has fallen off quite a bit. So there's this challenge, I think, in getting people out there or letting them know what's available. So talk a little bit, Hannah, about that balance.
Well, we've been talking about this a lot in Capital Crossroads under the Natural Capital, and a lot of it is just changing your perception that a park isn't just a destination, that you have to go to Jester Park or Easter Lake, that it's really in your backyard. And we have this great series of backyard creeks, and really turning that notion in that you can be your own local creek walker, right? And just taking neighborhood kids out into the creek and making them feel comfortable. And so we're starting to see, can we pilot projects like the creek walking project to turn children into looking at their backyard as their own park and making them feel like they can be a part of it? Is it something, a combination of something on an app that speaks to this generation that, you know, it's almost like a geocaching type thing? Can you find these things? Or do you even make fishing poles and bait tackle accessible almost like a free library, the little library? So we're really trying to explore that as part of a larger marketing opportunity through Capital Crossroads. That's one of the natural capital things. We have this great infrastructure of parks and creeks and trails, but we're not necessarily promoting that even internally within Des Moines, but also on a national basis. And so there's a multi-level marketing opportunity that also, you know, from attracting people here to visit to also teaching kids, you can go out in your backyard and go catch crawfish or look for tadpoles or frogs.
So I would kind of couple the marketing needs. So I would agree, like you look at the downtown Des Moines rivers, there are amazing migratory birds that come through downtown, and most people don't know that or aren't connected, and yet it's right there for you. I remember going on Gray's Lake Trail, and there were pelicans mating, and everybody just kept walking and didn't even see that. So there is probably a deeper understanding we need to have about the natural resources that are right by us. But on the other hand, if you take fishing as an example for downtown, where would you go fish?
Right.
People fish on the edges of bridges and on the edge of steep levees. We have to still provide infrastructure projects that allow for access and ease of access for people who don't want to take their kayak down a steep slope, you know, scooting down on their rears to get down there and having to climb up. You know, after that, Dr. Rick Tullochson, that was his experience on Beaver Creek. It's not accessible places that are just chock full of beauty and wonder that we do not help find ways to make them inviting for people who maybe aren't as adventuresome as others who are already out there. So I think we kind of do need to help people reimagine that these rivers are places to be explored, but we need to find the infrastructure projects that help make that easy as well.
Well, let's expand on that a little bit, because I know you've been working on the Water Trails program, and I believe it includes, as you mentioned earlier, some fishing access, but it also includes some wading areas, and maybe the biggest project of all is the downtown whitewater possibility.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, it's kind of the thumbnail on that.
So the Water Trails plan speaks to exactly that, sort of starting to look at places on the map for the greater Des Moines region for a number of creeks and rivers, so pretty wide, 150 miles. And we actually put points on the map where we think there should be wading areas, where we think there's access for, increased access for paddling, sort of carry down access for boats as well as motorboats, potential trails for birding, and then those wading access points as well. Downtown, and really from Waterworks Park to downtown, and then really Botanical Center, Birdland area. So downtown's a pretty big area. Obviously, there's two big dams, and we had to consider in this whole planning process, what do we do with these dams, and what is the interest with the public in terms of looking at modification of the dams. Much smaller towns have tackled this issue, Charles City and Manchester, Alligator, to name a few, and have successfully mitigated their dams to allow for recreational use and seen a huge boon in economic implications there. So we know, and basically, if we don't do anything recreationally, they're unsafe, and we know that there's people who have died going over that. So we're looking at opportunities we're commissioning an engineering study here in the next couple of months to look at those dams and say, we've suggested they be mitigated, what is the feasibility of the mitigation, what type of mitigation, and given the type of mitigation for those dams and other kind of constraints in downtown, like the levees, the historic balustrades that kind of create a concrete chute in downtown, but they're historic in nature. Given all those constraints, what are our opportunities? What's the potential? We've laid out a vision. We've tested that with the public. We know there's strong interest in mitigating those dams and really getting people out onto that water. It's just, the only people who really interact with that water in downtown Des Moines are the anglers. So really getting it much more active. And we'll know, I think, by the end of this year, really what's feasible and what that dollar amount looks like. And that's really what Rick Tollickson is anxious to hear, is what that dollar amount looks like in order to start to communicate within the business community to start fundraising to help make that happen.
And that dollar amount's not going to be $500,000.
No.
It sounds like DNR's done some work and maybe just sort of, wild estimate was 40 million maybe or so.
It is, so it's
more
hard
for
to
that.
know, yeah.
Right, we haven't done the engineering.
Right.
But it's probably tens of millions of dollars
Yes.
anyway, so we're talking a major endeavor here. But, MPO also did this great drawing, just sort of a vision of
Yeah.
what this might look like. And it's not just what's going on the water, right? We have the principal river walk, but you also looked at what happens between the principal river walk and the water. Can you talk a little bit about the strategies there?
In
Or
terms of the
possibility?
shoreline and
Yeah,
access
just
points.
trails, fishing spots.
Right, so really so it's not just paddling and making it open, which is nothing insignificant. You think about being able to paddle from, downstream of the Saylorville Dam all the way 30 miles later to Lake Red Rock, or very far upstream on the Raccoon River. You can do multi-day trips on the Raccoon River down to Lake Red Rock. That is not insignificant. Now you are talking tourism. But yes, I think in downtown, you think about all the just huge number of buildings and people dwelling in downtown now, to be able to provide them access, to be able to connect to the river, even if it's just going down there to get their toes dipped in the water, let alone providing better fishing access, so that it really can have it's not just for your grandfather kind of feeling anymore, that, that fishing can come back as a recreational activity. And then we did test out what people want for shoreline treatment. So do you want really that formal look that started in downtown and strong interest in really naturalizing it as much as possible? Again, we hear that there's a lot of birds. We want to encourage birding, encourage these as really wildlife corridors, that they're not just trails for people, that they're trails for wildlife as well.
So Perry, when you were talking about that number, which obviously we don't know what it is, but to put it in perspective, this last year between the fundraising for Jester Park Nature Center and the fundraising for Waterworks, both which are sort of starting to come to a close, we've raised privately almost $20 million between the two projects, $5 million of that coming from the Polk County Fund, which I consider almost private fundraising because the citizens chose to tax themselves to have things like this. And so when you look at $20 million of private investment from the citizens of Central Iowa, to talk about something like this, that could be 40, 50, however many millions of dollars, doesn't seem as insurmountable, that it actually is very doable, especially if it's going to change the face of downtown for economic development. And so that's the vision I keep trying to push forward, is that we've already done so much on our own as citizens of Central Iowa. A little bit of public investment is really going to catapult it to the next level.
He's the nerdy economist, and I know $40 million sounds like so much money, but the context is everything. So I'm sitting here trying to do the math in my head. I probably did it wrong, but there's 250,000 people in the Des Moines area. If I did it right, that's $40 a person as a one-time investment. That's not, we invest far, far more than that for our citizens in so many things. And the real question to me is to think carefully and do it right. Do the kinds of things find out what people care about. What is it they want? How do they want this money spent? Yes, anytime there's a million things we could do with project funding, regardless of the source. And so you really want to think about what's the right way to do it, the best places to put it, and what do people want to enjoy. And the conversation about fishing is really interesting. In the survey work we've done, and this is lake broadly, so it isn't urban only, but the top two activities people report enjoying, fishing is right up there, and the second one is relaxing. People want places they can take their kids, or take a date, or take your grandfather and go for a walk. And maybe you're looking at birds, maybe you'd like to learn more about birds, or maybe you just like to sit and watch stuff float down the river, but people value that, and that gets all the way back to the quality of life, and having those nearby where people can access easily, again, just resonates with people, this sort of quality of life idea.
We cited your research a lot because we were really worried that people would think that the paddling when the water trip didn't mean fishing,
Yeah.
and then just that beauty, that interest in the beauty and it as a place of respite, and that to sort of be careful and not just being 100% active places, to really kind of allow for those niches that were more intimate spaces just to enjoy the sunrise over the water kind of view. Yep.
Well, it does show in lots of surveys that wildlife viewing is one of the largest activities, recreational activities that's participated in. And when you look at demographics too, you know, fishing seems like maybe a smaller niche. It's not really. It's not just old white guys, you know, it's various cultures. There's a lot of Asiatic cultures that we see in our parks that fish a lot. And you've still got programs like Fish Iowa and things like that. Des Moines now has an urban fisheries technician that works out of the DNR. That all we look at is fishing opportunities and populations of species and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, I will mention it's pronounced crick, not creek.
It depends.
Are you sure?
So, Kansas, you say creek, not creek.
But one thing important that this implies, though, there's a lot of talk about water quality. And I think we need to keep focus on water quality. So things like if we're opening up access to these public waters, we need to consider bacteria, pathogenic bacteria and things like that, just like we do with beach monitoring. It's more complicated in streams and rivers, but it's something we need to think about. And then of course we, the nitrates, that's a separate issue that has to do with drinking water supplies and things like that. But the sediment load, you know, the Raccoon River, at least half the year, looks like chocolate milk. And that's important. We need to talk about that. And it's not just the agriculture or development or whatever it is. A lot of it is stream sloughing, so the banks themselves, because we've changed a lot of the hydrology in this state. So we need to take a good, hard look at that. When we look at stream remediation, and we go into it, that's very expensive and very complicated. When you now have a 15-foot bank down to that stream, and we're talking about having people in Des Moines and the Metro being able to access those streams, we can't have 15-foot drop-offs. So we need to talk a lot about how we make those banks more gentle, upland water retention, the whole hydraulics of climate change and how that's thinking of things, protecting critical infrastructure like bridges and roads and everything else. So it's a large, complicated topic that's going to take everybody working together to figure out.
Well, for sure, when we were doing the water trails, we did significant public input, and that was most consistently the concern we heard the most was, is it safe to even be in the water? And we heard some leaders who said, well, should we be working on water quality first and then tackling kind of recreational interest? And really what we've said is they both need to happen. It's going to be difficult to get the average citizen interested in water quality until they are down and viscerally connected to that water, and they see it and they see how sort of dirty it is, and that they want to know that it's safe, and they'll hopefully become more active in those efforts to make the water improved water quality and kind of decreasing flooding impacts on those as well. So we really felt like those things are coupled. Even though we weren't doing a water quality plan, we knew we had to speak to issues of water quality within that planning process.
Not to get too far into the details, but I think a lot of people do wonder about taking the dams out. We've heard different things about whether there'd be enough water to do anything on the Des Moines in particular. I mean, some decades ago there was some talk about if you took the dams out it'd be a mud flat just because of the way the hydrology works. Now I'm hearing differently. So what work has been done to ensure that we can take those out and still have enough water to float on?
Well, certainly that's part of the engineering study. We're not engineers, but the dams do serve a purpose still to cool water, mostly for infrastructure intake. So we cannot just take the dams out, and it would be in some times of the year you'd see sandbars in downtown Des Moines. That's really why the Scott Avenue Dam exists, is to kind of cool water so you have a more placid lake look in downtown Des Moines.
And Scott Avenue is the one on the south
Further
side
downstream
here, right?
than the one upstream. And it's a much smaller dam. The Center Street Dam is a 16-foot drop, and that's why that one is very different.
And we know where that is because now we have the Women of Achievement Bridge. I'm
Right.
just telling the viewers.
Yep.
That's the big basket handle bridge location.
Both dams really will have to be considered and mitigated in order to allow for recreational use. And has not been recommended that they the pool of water that they maintain will need to exist. It's a matter of taking out a big giant step of a 16-foot drop and really creating much smaller steps that become passable. So they'll still function in that way. And I'm sure at times of the year, it may be difficult to do some recreational types of activities. But again, we need to study it. We have some confidence they'll be, you'll be able to go tubing with me down the river.
And the palette is open. I mean, we can talk about this in inventive ways that we haven't been able to for decades. So if there are reaches of the river where there are sandbars, it's supposed to be that way. There are wildlife species that depend on it. Now, we need to be sensitive to other needs too. The Birdland Marina has boats, and so they want a pool, so that's important. The Army Corps of Engineers is very important in this discussion. And historically, the dams that were built, of course, at Saylorville and Red Rock are for flood prevention, and that is their number one. But recreational use and ecological integrity are number 2 and 3, and they have been much more willing to work with local communities, Des Moines metro areas, states, everything else, to make sure that that happens. So we can regulate the entire system from Saylorville to Red Rock in ways that are creative and inventive that we haven't been able to for probably 30, 40 years.
Rich is speaking to something I think that people may not know about, is that the Corps has been working with the Nature Conservancy on kind of updating their manual on just the frequency of and duration of how they let out water from Saylorville. And that usually is their primary purpose is on flood control. And now they're starting to add layers of criteria to their regulation manual of how and when they let out water. That includes, consideration for what might be happening with fish spawning. Well, that hasn't happened in the past. And so I do think that recreational interest downstream is going to be another criteria for looking at their water flows. Again, their primary purpose is flood control, but they're starting to sort of broaden and add layers to that.
So Kathy, I think your research maybe was of the general population, is that
Yes.
true? You haven't tested just the business community on these questions.
That's correct.
But, I mean, let's talk a little bit about, from what you've seen of people's, desires. We've talked about fishing, we've talked about bird watching, which is really always high on the list. I'm curious whether you see in your research indications that people are looking for things like Chautauqua, which is, northeast of town here, and a lot of people don't know it's there, but it's this big prairie area with some species we don't see anywhere else. So it's active versus passive recreation. Do you see that in your research?
Yeah, oh gosh, you teed this up for me perfectly. I was just, so we actually just received a large pot of funds from EPA who are very interested in value people place on ecological integrity, water quality, and the set of ecological values that are independent of their use. Because there's a sense that we've done a lot of research on people using our lakes, rivers, and streams. We have an understanding of why. We have these very strong patterns, and people go further to get recreational opportunities that they enjoy more. And those all fall in this rubric of sort of use of those amenities. But there's also a sense that many people value and care about the natural world in a more pristine state. And then so that water quality can improve, and that can change the fish species that you can catch, and that's a sort of use value. But there's a sense that some people have, they just want to know that there are places in the world that are like what they were pre-1850 or whatever year you want to pick, or 4,000, whatever. So actually we as I was listening, I was thinking, I should ask them about the sense of what you're finding from people. Do they care about the ecological integrity? And the big question we have in the study, and that we're starting to work on, is try to figure out how to communicate that to people, and to listen to them rather than us telling them. We want to step back as researchers and find out what do they care about, and maybe they don't care very much about, and probably what we're going to find, I'm guessing, is we're going to find that there are people who care a lot about having places that are more natural, that maintain that sort of integrity. And then there's other group that I don't really care that much, but I do really want a place I can fish safely and take my kids So for me, I think the real issue is the portfolio.
Mhm.
So Iowa has the opportunity to have bits and pieces of all of that. And you've heard about management. We can manage for a variety of endpoints. We can have places that are really for young kids and very active use, where we changed the hydrology and made really fun things. But then we can also have places that are the Chautauquas or where they're really for a different segment of the population that really wants that more pristine. And we should, that's what we should be thinking about, is that breadth. And again, those are all quality of life things that are going to appeal to different segments of the population, and they're going to appeal to different segments of different times in people's lives. I grew up on the river. For those of you who don't know, the river is the Mississippi River.
The capital T.
Yeah, the river.
river.
Yeah, so I grew up in
The big bridge.
yeah, right. I mean, I was in the Quad Cities, and I mean, we just call it the river, right? So,
Yeah.
in the evening, my folks would take a drive to the river. And there was Lock and Dam 14, we'd go and watch the eagles when they would come down in the winter, and it was just part of our life. And that kind of, only as I got older did I started really get interested about, well, what is this river and how does all this work? And that's a perfect example of combined uses. So the lock and dam system was completely for transportation, and that's been incredibly economically valuable to have the lock and dams, the ability to move barges up and down. But over time, we also realized that it's recreation and that there are portions of the river we want to maintain for its natural intrinsic values. And you go upstream from the Quad Cities, and there's some beautiful areas that are really much more, none of it is like it was in Mark Twain's day, but more of that sort of feel. So that was a long-winded academic answer to say yes.
Yeah, we find that at Chautauqua, which is northeast of town there. It's 9,000 acres, prairie wetland complex. A lot of the people in the Des Moines Metro don't even know it exists. But when you talk about Chautauqua and that we have nesting sandhill cranes for probably the first time in 100 years, and we have river otter and bobcat, nesting bald eagles, and great blue heron rookeries and things like that, people are like, that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know that was there. And even if they don't make the adventure trip to actually see it, they'd like to know that it's there and that some of this is happening along the old Skunk River bottom.
Well, it's interesting, getting back to what Kathy just mentioned, because I remember, probably now 30 years ago, Amoco was thinking about bringing this credit card center to West Des Moines. And one of the parameters was whatever community got this, it's like 1,000 jobs, I think. Whatever community got this development had to have a lake, a major lake within 30 miles. Well, Saylorville was what was entered, so because Saylorville was there and close by, we got this Amoco credit card center. So so now we're in a completely different era where we're looking at what millennials are asking for and other workers, and does seem to be, there's kind of this dynamic where everyone says they want to be outside, but sometimes we don't do a good job of it. So but it is, the demand is there. So I'm just wondering, for those of you particularly who are raising money from the business community in Des Moines and everything, are you convinced that the business leaders are looking at this and thinking we really need to address the quality of life issues and that outdoor recreation is part of that?
Unequivocally with the nature
Absolutely.
center.
Talk about the nature center. It's a big project.
So it's, and I'll let Hannah talk about the Great Outdoors Foundation and their role in it. But the Nature Center itself is a $10 million project.
Where is it?
It's in Jester Park, just to the northwest of town, 20-minute drive from where we're sitting right here. Right now, Jester Park has an annual visitorship of about 500,000 people a year. So this is between the equestrian center, the golf course, the event center, 6 campgrounds, bison elk exhibit, playscape. We got a number of things out there. It's kind of our playground. When we finish this nature center, we believe that number is going to go to over 1 million visitors a year at Jester Park, a major amenity for the area.
So just for perspective, that would be almost twice the number of people who go to see the Iowa Cubs in a season.
It's actually, the visitorship will probably be over that of Blank Park Zoo, Botanical Gardens, others that are our friends and partners. But yeah, it's going to be a major attraction, a regional attraction.
Now, is this a facility that will not only have, I assume, some educational value, but also might be a place for weddings and things too, or what's the structure like?
So most of it will be natural resources interpretation and school classes and things like that. We're going to facilitate a lot of outdoor recreation. So in the winter, it might be cross-country skiing or snowshoeing. In the summer, it might be camping, hiking, paddling, things like that. We have a separate Jester Park Lodge where a lot of the events themselves already take place. So we don't anticipate a lot of weddings, but there will be a lot of like family gatherings, reunions, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church groups, and things like that use it.
Aren't you talking about some sort of outdoor waterscape?
We are, a streamscape we're calling it.
Okay,
So
and what's
there'll
that?
be from the front of the building and winding around to the back and then going down to a pond, there'll be a streamscape. So it's a highly engineered natural system, if you will. It'll have places where people can engage with the water, zero entry pools, ADA accessible platforms and things like that. Gurgling water that people can actually immerse themselves and engage in the water itself. And then going down to Discovery Pond, there will be a prairie art walk. So we've thought a lot about art in the building and outside of the building and incorporated public art into our planning and design.
And Hannah, so you've been involved, talk a little bit about your role in fundraising for this.
So I've assisted in the fundraising for the Jester Park Nature Center and then on a couple other things, and of course was involved with the bond. I think when you look at is the business community supportive and are they, seeing the importance, I think that the answer is an overwhelmingly yes. And as what happens in Des Moines, we have a long history of if things aren't being done, private citizens and businesses step up and do it. And hopefully that creates the interest where the legislature follows. And certainly I think we're seeing that. The business community and private citizens have stepped up and said these things are important, not just with these built parks and the nature center and things like that that facilitate great programming, but also, Chautauqua was built almost entirely with mitigation money. And there's a big push from, as we're developing, there are developers saying we want to help with this mitigation and create the next Chautauqua, the next greenways that can help, expand this, great legacy that we have. And so I certainly see the business community helping and leading that and supporting those of us that do that. I think what we're missing is that state piece that helps bolster that work, and certainly leveraging that private investment that we're having from the corporations and citizens.
So how many acres is Chautauqua again now?
9,000. It's the largest prairie wetland complex in central United States. It's bigger than Neil Smith.
So again, just to put it into perspective, Waterworks Park, which we haven't even discussed, there's a big plan to improve Waterworks Park, is twice as big as New York Central Park. A lot of people don't realize that. But Chautauqua then is several times bigger than Waterworks Park. And it's been growing, right, because of these mitigations and everything.
Right. And we're looking at buffers and water quality. We actually got a plan 2-3 years from now, too. We're going to have more access so people that can go to Chautauqua and experience Chautauqua and love Chautauqua, but yet the conservation is of ultimate importance out there. We have nesting sandhill cranes and we don't want to scare them away. So we're going to figure out ways that people can go out there and actively engage, but yet respect the conservation value of Chautauqua.
So you may not have the outdoor concerts that Waterworks has once in a while.
Probably not.
Teva, did you
I'm
have
just going to add, we are very proud of Waterworks, but I think we also miss an opportunity to think about Waterworks as a connected park system. And if you move downstream from Waterworks is Grace Lake Park, and then if you move upstream from Waterworks, you've got state parks and county parks. We've got Browns Woods and Walnut Woods and Raccoon River Park. We have city, county, state parks all the way connected there. And then beyond that, you've got a number of quarries that at some point will come offline, and we'll have the opportunity for restoration work to continue to expand the green space, and that you have this massive connected green space. I mean, it's literally a connected park system that really should be thought about as a regional park, one massive park. And all of these government entities really have an opportunity to come together and think of themselves as a connected system. Many of us on our bikes travel through them in one afternoon, even though they're all different government entities that are planning and maintaining them separately. I think there's a real opportunity to start to think about them, even from a marketing perspective, as a connected system.
And that's something that the Great Outdoors Foundation and Capital Crossroads is currently doing together. We're trying to commission a study right now to look at sustainable funding mechanisms for a regional park. And once that study's done, we'll probably implement the regional plan to put together this regional plan. But when you look at it, I mean, what Teva says, I mean, it goes all the way, and then you have that new bridge, the Grand Prairie Parkway Bridge, that will connect to south of the river, and that has a bike trail, and there's green space already all the way up to the Raccoon River Trail that eventually will connect into the High Trestle Trail. And when all those connection pieces happen, you have this huge green space and trail system that connects all these jewels together, from Waterworks to Jester Park. And that's our next step, is we need to think of ourselves as a regional park system, not just these because I don't know, the birds don't know as we navigate those.
Well, and the MPO's plan and the other plans, you've talked a lot about connecting things and making it easier to get to the river up and down, connect these trails, connect, where do I park or where do I ride my bike to get on. And you may have just answered my final question. We're about out of time, but I want to just go down the road starting with you, Rich, and just take a snapshot of where we are now and talk a little bit about sort of the most important next steps that we can take to make this valuable for workforce attraction and retention.
Sure. Well, I think we're doing very well as far as developing infrastructure and planning mechanisms, and that the organizations involved are doing very well. I think we have work to do when it comes to water quality and ecological integrity, that those are integral to these systems. You look at other major metropolitan areas, Pittsburgh and Portland are two examples that I think have done it very well, and we can do better, learn from their mistakes and then emulate their successes on what we're going to do with some of these greenway, regional park planning, regional trails planning, and everything else, but then looking at the water quality and the ecology of the area, make sure that it fits the infrastructure that we're putting down.
Kathy, any thoughts on?
I defer to the other three, but I would say that it is really impressive over the 25 years I've been back in central Iowa, of the seriousness with which our government entities, our NGOs take trying to do it right. Getting the science, getting the numbers, thinking about what do people care about, not just what does DNR think is right for everybody else, or what does the Nature Conservancy, but really thinking about what the citizens want. And both as a taxpayer and as an academic researcher, I'm just so impressed, and it's really great. We have really strong public and private partnerships here and NGOs, and I'm not sure everybody really understands how unique we are in that stead. So.
Well, here's two of them.
Yeah.
Right here.
Absolutely.
I would say it's been
Teva?
just so much fun and a privilege to be able to work on these projects because they have been embraced so well by all levels of our community. The one thing I would suggest is get out on the water. I thought it was remarkable. The mayor in Johnston, she's a very active gal, had never been on Beaver Creek, despite being the mayor and being there for a long, long time. It was one afternoon paddle on Beaver Creek, and it was game changer for her. She realized for the first time what a missed opportunity it had been for Johnston to not be turning towards their creek. She was amazed at the beauty. That never would have happened through pictures. Like, we had to get her out on the water and to see that there wasn't a way to get out on the water so that you could see what was missing, but also see what we were missing by not providing those spaces. So getting people out to these rivers and lakes and really seeing what the opportunities are, you fall in love with it. So I think there's no substitute for getting out there.
Yeah.
Well, I think we know what our long-term vision is creating this regional park that, is not only an icon regionally, but nationally. And I think that we have those building blocks in place. But as we go there, finding impactful, smaller victories along the way that help point out what, Teva and Rich were saying. Just even naming and signing our watersheds, I think, would be huge. You can't go 2 miles in Austin, Texas without knowing which watershed you're in and how you're impacting it, right? So even if we just did simple signage like that this creek is a part of this watershed, and putting that in people's minds, I think that small change could make a huge impact as we're starting to do more and more water quality restoration and asking more out of the public to be a part of that. So I think recognizing those on our way to that bigger regional park is, I think, key.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for a
Thank you.
fantastic discussion. And thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Perry Beeman of the Business Record. If this discussion has prompted story ideas for you you'd like to share with me, you'll see my contact information on the screen. Please call or email anytime. And thank you again for this great discussion.